pianists and teachers. Today we're going to talk about how to teach the Etude Opus 82 number 65 by Cornelius Gurlitt. This is oftentimes subtitled things like The Storm or Night Journey, but it is from Gurlitt's First Steps for the Young Pianist, Opus 82. Here's what it sounds like. If we haven't met before, my name is Jana Williamson and welcome to my home piano studio here in the suburbs of Chicago. This is one of my favorite teaching pieces of all time. And I know I say that about a lot of pieces, but I really do love this piece. And I know a lot of people love this piece because it shows up in a lot of books. It can be found in some method books, including the Piano Safari Repertoire Book 3. But this is also a great piece for bridging students into perhaps their first intermediate historical repertoire series. It can be found in Keith Snell's Etudes Level 3 or Essential Repertoire Level 3, as well as the Festival Collection Book 2. And it is in one other method series, at least that I know of, the Alfred Premier Lesson Book 5. So this is a great piece that is an example of one included on my Method to Masterworks resource. If you haven't already checked that out at this point, please do so via the link in the description of this video. It's a spreadsheet along with a training video that lists out historical pieces like this one by Gurlitt, where they can be found in both elementary method series as well as intermediate historical repertoire books, and it can help you really bridge the gap with your student from that elementary study in a method series into playing historical repertoire. So this piece is most notable for the left hand melody in D minor, with the right hand just playing these basic repeated intervals, mostly seconds and thirds, or it is entirely seconds and thirds. And because of the low range of that melody and the key that we're in, it can sound very ominous. And so that's why I think some people have given it, titles such as Night Journey or The Storm. But it also is just such a great example of a bass clef melody, which we don't always encounter in piano repertoire. We frequently get right hand melody with left hand accompaniment. And so I do like that the Alfred Premier authors gave this the title of Song of the Cello. And you could certainly talk with your student about what instruments play in the lower range, cello, trombone, bassoon, and what might give this a beautiful legato and beautifully shaped phrases. That's going to be one of the things we talk about in this piece for sure. I do have a video featuring an easier piece with a similar idea of a left-hand melody and right-hand accompaniment. That's Deep Singer, and if you click right up there, you should be able to find that as well. So our students need to know that we're in D minor, and they need to have a good sense for the D minor scales at this level. I would put this as very late in elementary or early intermediate for sure. And then we can take a look at the right hand very quickly when we first open this up after we have a discussion about what's going on in general, and just find some of the intervals because it is quite easy. I sometimes will have students circle with a pencil every time the interval changes because you have 3 full measures of that D third, minor third right there. So then in measure 4, we have a second and a third, and then we go back to that same third. So I would kind of block through each of those changes, not doing the repetition. Students will oftentimes just want to, repeat it over and over again for you. But I would want them to see just how many times and exactly where it changes. There are just a couple that become problematic, and it's right at the end. So you're going to want to go through measure 13 to 14, making sure they're ready for the C sharp. I don't think those are difficult, but they do sometimes trip students up. So just go through those quickly. And like I said, the right hand's quite easy. So once you've kind of put that aside and said, okay, we know what the right hand is doing, then you can tackle these left hand phrases. There are some big stretches, some bigger intervals, and so fingering is very important. The fingering that you choose is also going to aid your student in playing these phrases beautifully and shaping them. So depending on what edition you're using, I would start by checking out what the editor has put in there. I'm guessing that most of them are going to be very, very similar. something along the lines of starting with 5-3, very similar to an arpeggio fingering. So hopefully your students have some experience with basic arpeggios at this point. But we would want to get up to this A with the thumb, cross over the 2 for the B flat, and then come back down. Having that thumb on the downbeat of measure 3 is very helpful for that phrasing. Big lift, you can't reach that interval, so they need to be encouraged to lift off of that D. And then that broken octave is so satisfying. You do want to play that legato, so your student should be able to reach the broken octave, just to stretch for that and then contract again. They don't need to stay in a, stretched out claw hand position, but just stretch out for it, play the low A, and then contract again. Students also need to be ready for the fact that the starting note changes in the pickup to measure 10. Instead of being in D minor, we have this F major feel. Back to D minor. Again, lift. Lift. And then we get that low octave again. I think it's just such an amazing left hand part. This is really a moment you can talk with your student about how their left hand gets to be the star and to really shine out and play this brooding melody. If your student is one who likes to sing and you wanted to write some lyrics that would fit the character of this piece, you could certainly do that. You could also just talk about if you heard this piece and it was a film score, what would be happening in the movie at this time? And I would guess that most students would say something like, it's dark outside, or you're in the forest, or something along those lines. So something dark and brooding for sure. So once the left hand can really play those phrases beautifully with consistent fingering, then we can add the right hand back in and we can deal with the natural issue of balance. Whenever you have repeated intervals or chords, it's very easy for them to get very pedantic and very heavy. And so the easiest way to work on this is to first of all make sure the right hand can play lightly, make sure the left hand can play with good full solid tone, and then to do ghost practice. And ghost practice is just when the accompanimental hand is playing the notes silently on top of the keys without making any sound, while the melody hand actually plays with good tone. This is very hard to do if you haven't done it many times. And so I always warn my students before we try this is going to be hard the first time you try it, and that's okay. It's hard for everybody. Our brains don't like to separate doing two different things on two different sides of our bodies. So you have to convince your brain and convince your hands that they're going to do these two different things. Once they can do that ghost practice reliably, then you just let the left hand barely come in enough that you can just kind of hear it. And it's okay if some of the notes don't fully sound because you're just barely letting it back in. And then you can continue to work with your student with you listening and giving them feedback on what you hear, with them listening. Is the left hand playing louder than the right hand, or are you hearing those chunky intervals kind of assaulting your ears over and over again? This does need to have a very steady tempo, which can be a little bit tricky. Students can either tend to take this way too fast because they see that, or they can take it too slow because they're dealing with all the issues of the left hand moving around and the balance. My edition here marks it allegro non troppo, so fast but not too much. I would advocate for a tempo that allows you to really shape those phrases beautifully but has some motion in it, so it doesn't start to feel like... we should not be feeling this in the eighth note pulse. We should be feeling it in the core note for sure. So 1, 2, 3. As I said, this is a very evocative piece, and every edition I've looked at in preparing for this video has a different subtitle. So I would love to encourage my student to come up with their own subtitle. I have never had a student that I can remember play this piece and not enjoy playing it on some level. So this is a great one to help them connect with imaginatively and emotionally so that they can decide what is the dark and brooding picture that they have in their own brain. Does it sound like a storm to them? Does it sound like somebody riding a horse through the forest at night? And you might be surprised at the creative thing that your student comes up with, but as long as it's something that reasonably represents the mood of this piece, then absolutely let them write that for their subtitle and let them enjoy creating that picture for their audience. All right, I hope that gives you a few ideas on teaching this wonderful piece by Gurlitt, one of my favorites. If you have other pieces by Gurlitt that you enjoy, would you leave a comment below? I would love to know. There's so many great ones that he wrote for students. Don't forget to check out Method to Masterworks and all the books that I will link in the description of this video. And I wish you all the best in your teaching.